Question: do you sometimes feel that your Rominimal or micro house drums could need some improvements? Do they sometimes feel a little bit stiff, a little bit boring sounding? If yes, this video is perfectly for you, because in this week's video I want to share 3 simple but powerful techniques that you can use inside Ableton Live to spice up your drums a little bit, to make them more complex sounding. I also share a little kind of hack that you can use to save your very own drum racks with effects in it, so you have them handy in a drag and drop like manner. So if this sounds interesting to you, let's jump right in. Now before we jump in, I quickly want to mention my soft but snappy Rominimal Ableton Live kick template. This is a little drag and drop tool that you can use for synthesizing your drums. I added some macros to this little tool and you can download it for free. Just click the link below. In this video I found that whenever I add some new stuff to a track, the kick somehow doesn't fit perfectly into a track anymore. So this little tool is handy in my opinion, because you can really synthesize your very own kick. You can add a little click, you can make it soft, make it punchy, make it classic sounding, whatever you like, whatever your taste is, or whatever your track needs, right? So if you want that, it's completely for free. Just click the link below and then you get it shipped to your inbox. Now let's jump over to this week's video. Hope it's inspiring, hopefully it's helpful. Thanks for watching. Let's jump in. So for this week's video, I want to talk a little bit how we can make a simple drum loop a little bit more complex sounding. I want to share 3 techniques that you can apply inside Ableton Live to your very own claps, so to make them more complex sounding. So yeah, let's have a quick listen to the audio source that we are working with. Yeah, let's start with the first technique that I used for this specific clap here. So if you load a drum rack into Ableton, and within the drum rack you add some samples, right? So if you load up a sample, you get this sampler, right? And for the default setting, it shows you probably this waveform here, but we also have a little tab here that calls controls, right? And by default it probably looks something like this, and we have a little setting here where we can turn on the LFO. Now this lets us control those different values here, like pan, volume and pitch. Now for the clap, can basically choose the LFO, right? The LFO settings. I like to use random, and so we get different random settings for volume, for pitch, for every bar or whatever. I like to choose bar. And I like to go not too drastic with those settings here, so I just get little variations here and there, right? So without, always the same. Let's turn off this effect here. And as you can imagine, you can use that little hack, this little technique on every kind of sample that you use, right? So for example, I have a little modular sample. I call it just modeler because I added cut it out from a little jam that I did with reactor blocks, and this is basically the sound, right? The pitch is always changing, and this is because I simply turned up the pitch here. Right? It always changes. Without. Stays the same. But here we get some little variation. We can also turn up the pan a little bit so it always jumps around in the panning a little bit. Especially for percussion, maybe this could also work very well, I would say. So yeah, this is the first technique, simple, but I would say really powerful if you combine it with different sounds. So the second thing is adding send effects to the drum rack. Now, as you can see, let's just pull up a drum rack so you can see what I mean. A simple stock plugin. And if you switch to the chain here, you can then load up effects. You see drop audio effects here. And let's just add some auto pan, maybe some chorus. As you can see here, we have some sends for all the different samples, for all the different cells here. For example, the snare. Now I can send it to B, which is the auto pan. Right? And you can also add some chorus up. Just so that you get the reference. Now in this case here, I added Fracture, which is a freeware plugin from Glitch Machines, I guess, and I really like because it adds some randomness, in my case, to the clap here. Maybe I can crank it up a little bit more. So I get some little bits and pieces, some fractures here and there. Then I pair it with some Echo Boy after that from Sound Toys. Without it. Crystallizer. Without that. And finally, last but not least, again LFO here. But this only works within this drop here. That drop is basically a sample. And I assigned different values here to the sends, to those effects, right? So I loaded in 3 effects in that case, and then I used the LFO to send different amounts in random to those effects, right? To get some variation. Without, you can see here it stays the same. And here. Let's turn it on. Without. Yeah, I hope you get the idea here. Now the third technique is to add some variation to your drum loops. Is basically just layering, of course, and but also adding some kind of question and answer kind of thing. So for this, for the clap, for example, I used a clap, traditional clap, but also I used a snare drum, as you can hear. Now you can hear I have some question and answer here. This is without all the processing. Let's assign some quick keyboard shortcuts so we can mute it all at once. Mapped all the processing here to one key, which is M, so I can mute it very quickly. So let's have a quick A/B check here. Now this is without processing, also without the LFO within the sampler, right? So now let's turn it on to get a quick AMP. Right. And also on the snare drum, I used a different interval here for the LFO, and on the clap 1 bar, and on the snare 4 bars, so we get even more variation and whatnot, right? So let's mute it again. Now let's have a listen in context. So all the processing is on now on the clap and snare drum. Now let's mute it. 3, 2, 1. Sounds very dry. Now let's bring it in back in. And so on, right? So I hope this gives you some ideas, some inspiration to work inside Ableton, maybe inside the drum rack, adding some variation to your drum loops in a subtle but simple, but I would say powerful and quick way. And by the way, I forgot to mention why actually adding effects to the drum rack itself. The benefit is we can easily save it and use it later, right? Rather than sending it to a normal return track here, right? So we have it basically handy and just can insert it very quickly and then work from there. So everything is saved inside a drum rack, very handy, and it's ready to go, right? Maybe you found that your drums maybe somehow doesn't roll, or maybe you find you could improve your drums a little bit. Maybe try out this technique if you like, maybe on the hi-hats, maybe on the clap, maybe on some percussions. Would work great in my opinion. And then save it and use it later if you like it. If you come up with something great, save it, because it's your taste, right? Your style. Experiment, have fun, and then save it for your very own use, and so you have ready to go a drum rack. So yeah, hope this was inspiring. Hopefully this was helpful. Hope to see you next week. Thanks again. Cheers. Bye bye.